Today is New Year's Eve, and today's video is about the very worst television show in history. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal-Detech. For those of you who remember him, Dick Clark was an American icon. Besides hosting American Bandstand, he also hosted New Year's Rockin' Eve. Every December 31st, and tonight'll be no different, millions of people watch that big ball drop in New York City's Times Square as we count down the end of the year. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but my father was Dick Clark's producer, and the one who created and produced New Year's Rockin' Eve for Dick. But there was this one TV show he created, a made-for-TV movie that was so horrible, so bad on so many levels, that it was only ever shown once. It aired on a single night, Friday, January 24th, 1975. Remember that back then there was no internet, no cable, and only 3 television channels that you could watch on TV. So when it aired that night on ABC television, it was a big deal. It had Dick Clark's name and production company and my dad's creative vision behind it. The show is called The Werewolf of Woodstock, and it stars a young Michael Parks, the actor who eventually went on to do Quentin Tarantino movies. Now, because my dad not only produced The Werewolf of Woodstock, but also co-wrote it as well, it is very difficult for me, his son, to remain objective here. There is nothing like The Werewolf of Woodstock in television history, and trust me, that's a good thing. So, because of this, let me quickly summarize from an article written by John Condit, and I will leave a link to it down below. Please, after this video is all finished, go have a look at it. It is one of the funniest reviews in history. The Werewolf of Woodstock begins with a group of hippie musicians that travel to Woodstock, New York to record an album on the remains of the Woodstock Festival stage. We're introduced to our main character, a local resident named Bert. Now, Bert, as John puts it in his review, hates hippies. I mean, he really hates hippies. So he goes to the Woodstock stage one night to vandalize it and ends up getting himself electrocuted. The electricity turns him into a werewolf, but only at night. During the day, he remains all bandaged up from the accident, laying in bed. However, after dark and when there's a thunderstorm, he turns into a werewolf and starts terrorizing the town of Woodstock. He kills dogs, townspeople, and ends up kidnapping one of the female hippie musicians and winds up holding her hostage in an old abandoned mill. Meanwhile, local police are trying to figure out how to stop this, and they decide that the best course of action is to get that hippie band of musicians to blast their music on the Woodstock stage. They believe that this will lure the werewolf out of hiding, and then they can ambush and catch him. So they start blasting the music, and then the police turn on their sirens. They shoot at the werewolf, who does the very first werewolf curly shuffle. Whoop, 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 whoop. After that, the werewolf then takes off with the girl, and the police are now in pursuit chasing after him. And then, ladies and gentlemen, you get to witness a true television cinematic first. The very first werewolf carjacking. You know what? I'm just going to play the actual scene for you. Here it goes.
Hey! Hey! Where you going, my dune buggy? Hey!
Could television cinema possibly get any better than a werewolf tearing off in a dune buggy and shaking his fist in the air? Now, before I continue, there's something that you need to know. You know that guy that gets, punched by the werewolf in the dune buggy scene? That's my dad. So they end up chasing the werewolf to a power plant for the climactic ending. He runs up the metal stairs, and it is at that point, ladies and gentlemen, as these great reviewers have pointed out, that we get to witness the birth of Donkey Kong. Yes, the werewolf starts throwing down empty barrels at the cops below, just like that gorilla in Donkey Kong. I tell you, this is television at its absolute finest. Soon, the police captain arrives with a rifle and a silver bullet, because you have to have a silver bullet to kill a werewolf. He shoots the werewolf, and then the werewolf falls down to his death. And the show ends, and TV history has been made. There is so much more I could talk about this movie. The fact that it was shot entirely on videotape and not film, which is why it has that 1970s soap opera look. The fact that the writers of this show originally intended it for it to be a comedy, but miscommunication at that time with Dick Clark ended up having it marketed and produced as a horror movie. Then there's the werewolf mask itself. The werewolf is basically a guy in flannel clothes with a rubber mask. True story. That year, my dad actually gave me a werewolf mask from the same costume department that made that one. And I wore it when I went trick-or-treating as a kid on Halloween in 1975. I was 8 years old. You see, as bad a TV movie as The Werewolf of Woodstock was, I actually watched it with my dad the very night it aired on ABC in 1975. We sat on the couch together, and I remember his arm around me and seeing this guy get electrocuted on the Woodstock stage. My parents had just gotten divorced, and I didn't get to see my dad very often, but we did watch it together that night, and it's one of my greatest memories with him. A few years later, when I was 13 years old, my dad became very sick and ended up in the hospital with cancer that had spread to his liver and colon. He only had a few weeks left to live, and at the time, I was now shooting my own movies on an 8mm camera. A hospital doctor at the time told me that laughter was the best medicine and could even possibly cure disease. So I made a few short movies and played them on a projector for him in his hospital room, trying to make him laugh and get better. One movie, which was the final one that I made at that time, now that I think about it, I put on the werewolf mask again. He passed away a few days after I showed him that film that I had made. When you lose a parent at age 13, you never get to go through these important adolescent years with them. You never get the opportunity to say things like, "Shut up, Dad," or "How could you make that dumb werewolf show?" You never grow up to experience your relationship evolve and see them as an adult parent trying to do their best with all of the mistakes, the flaws, the bad decisions as part of who they are. All you're left with actually is just a few memories of watching a show together or hearing their voice, yelling at a werewolf before they get their dune buggy stolen. New Year's Eve is a time of reflection and new beginnings. Now it's your turn. What are you reflecting on this evening? What do you want for the years ahead? And where do you want to be 1 year from tonight? One day, my kids will grow up to eventually question some of my decisions, and they should. That's a normal part of growing up from childhood to adulthood and seeing your parents in a whole new way. But that never happened to me. So I needed to grow up a bit tonight. I want to wish you all the happiest of holidays and all the best from my family to yours for the new year. I hope 2022 is the greatest year you've ever had, and I want to thank you for being here with me. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next year in all new videos. Good night.
Hey!